Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J-Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Back again to detail everything that's going on in sports with your favorite little host to uncover all that's going on, as this is the J-Reels Podcast with your host, J-Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And I owe you guys and gals a little bit of an apology because as I start this podcast talking about the NFL, big week 15, a lot of big games, especially in the 425 window, including a big one tonight. But I did not really get into a lot of the top of the NFC the other day because as I was getting all wrapped up in Juan Soto and how big that was for the Met organization, for yours truly as a diehard Met fan, and for the NFL talking about some of the bottom rung teams in the NFC, whether it be the Seahawks fighting in the NFC West or even the Tampa Bay Buccaneers overtaking the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC South. I didn't really discuss the top of the pecking order when it comes to the NFC, where the crazy game last week against Green Bay and Detroit and how that unfolded, as well as the Eagles just skating by the Carolina Panthers. And that's where I want to begin, because not that I'm going to rehash what happened last week, but my apology is to not say to you that I didn't want you to think that I totally forgot about what's going on with the Eagles or with the Lions or the top two seeds there, or even the Vikings for that matter, but with the Eagles. And now we have another story that had unfolded the early part of the week where in the postgame, AJ Brown was asked about probably some of the issues there with the offense, and in a one-word answer, he came out and said passing. So right away made everybody think that there has to be some disruptive force that's going on in that locker room between the quarterback Jalen Hurts and the disgruntled wide receiver. And then it was even punctuated by the comments made by Brandon Graham, the longtime Eagle, who's actually out for the rest of the year as he suffered an injury a couple of weeks ago. But for Graham to come out, and I don't have an exact quote, but for him to pretty much say that they were friends before this, and that, of course, caused a stir in the Philadelphia media to where it had to be squashed yesterday, where both Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown said that they were good. And even though out of frustration, AJ Brown showing up the quarterback, because when you slam your helmet down in the first half the way he did, and with the Eagle offense not in sync, especially from the passing attack, we know that Saquon Barkley is having an MVP-like year with what he's done on the ground, but they have not been able to click a lot on all cylinders when it comes to their passing game. And A.J. Brown's a guy who, just like a wide receiver, the divas that they are, wants the ball, would rather catch 10 passes for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns and lose than catch 2 balls for 20 yards, no touchdowns, and win. And for Brown to come out and squash that, as well as Hurts, was a big thing, because as we've seen here with the Eagles, pretty much dating back to this time last year, if you recall, they were 10-1, got off to that great start. Yeah, they stumbled a little bit, in particular that Monday night game where they, thankfully, the drop pass by Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and then the week before that, winning against Buffalo, 2 games that they actually should have lost. And who would have thought at that time that would have precipitated a losing streak, and for them to go into a tailspin for the remainder of that year. They lost the 1 seed. Remember, they got pasted by San Francisco and then lost bad games down the stretch. And then obviously culminating in that playoff defeat down in Tampa, which was inexplicable to say the least. And then now here it is with this year, and even in the middle of the season where Nick Sirianni got into it with the fans, embroiled with that controversy and even the disconnect between the head coach and quarterback, at least that was assumed, on top of the fan base wanting Sirianni out as coach. And now here they are, even after what happened there Sunday, barely getting by the Panthers, who have played well and have been pesky here over the last few weeks with Bryce Young back at quarterback, which certainly is a bright spot for the Panthers, maybe moving forward. But back to the Eagles, as far as with what's gone on there, here they are at 11-2, a game behind the Detroit Lions for a 1 seed. And even though with Minnesota breathing down their necks, but they don't have to worry about the Vikings, because with them in the same division as Detroit, they don't have to worry about seeding whether or not that the Vikings, if they do have a better record or they're tied in the NFC, it's not as if that they're going to get a 2 seed or have to knock down the Eagles as far as seeding goes. But with all that being said, here over the last year, dating back to this time, like I mentioned a year ago, the Eagles right now are in a good spot to where they could draw even with the Lions, even after this weekend, although both teams have very big games on their schedule. And if you want to call them Super Bowl previews, you can, although I think it's silly to do that, even if it is late in the season, where the Super Bowl, I believe, is almost 2 months to the day. I think it's February 9th this year, but still, the Super Bowl is on the horizon, but we still have 4 more weeks, 4 more games to go, and then obviously the 3 rounds of the playoffs before we even get to Super Bowl Sunday. But it seems as if all is calm in Philadelphia as of right now. Let's see whether or not that they're going to continue this winning streak, similar to what the Lions have done here pretty much since the summertime, when you think about it, because the Lions have not lost since week 2 when they lost to Tampa there in their building. And since then, they've been on a roll, similar to the Eagles after losing against Tampa. I believe that was week 4. They have also run the table to where they have been on this winning streak pretty much since the end of summer, and then now with winter approaching a week from this coming Saturday. So the Eagles, you would think that with these games forthcoming, and I guess I'll segue to that now when we look at the schedule, and of course we have a big one tonight in the NFC West. I'll get to that in a second. But the Eagles, who will be hosting the Steelers on Sunday, 4/25, the same window where Buffalo will be going to Detroit. And yes, we could talk about Super Bowl previews for both of those games and those contests. And you also have another good 4 o'clock game, which I'll get to in a little bit, with Indianapolis and Denver. But the Eagles, who have been riding this winning streak and flying high, you would think at some point you'd want to lose along the way. And the same for Detroit for that matter. Buffalo, as we know, they lost last week in LA to the Rams. But you would think this would probably be a good week to lose a game if you're the Eagles or the Lions. And you can say, Jay Reels, what do you mean? Lose a game? Why would you want to lose? You want to continue to ride this train as far as you could go. But because these 2 games are against opponents from the different conference, so it's not going to impact the NFC playoff picture or even the AFC if you're the Steelers for that matter, and Buffalo too, because remember, both of those 2 teams are 2 and 3 in the standings in the AFC. So if Buffalo were to lose and Pittsburgh were to win, they would obviously get a chance to where they would be leapfrogged over the Bills for the 2 seed in the AFC. But it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because those are NFC games. If the Steelers have a hiccup along the way in the AFC, and if the New England Patriots, who will play the Buffalo Bills after this game, will pretty much have no shot to beat Buffalo, and for the Bills to run the table there where they have 2 games against New England, sandwiched by a game against the Jets, that's going to factor in the 2 seed for the Steelers because they have hard games along the way. Not only in Philadelphia against the Eagles, but they have to go to Baltimore on a short week Saturday, follow that by another short week Wednesday, Christmas Day on Netflix against the Kansas City Chiefs. So when we take a look at the big picture when it comes to these teams trying to get seeding, trying to see if they could get a chance to get a 2 seed for home field for at least the first 2 rounds, if it happens to go that far. When you're the Eagles and knowing that they're going to be locked in as a 2 because you can forget about Seattle or even Tampa trying to overtake them. They're too far behind in the standings. So at least they know they have that cushion, but they have the 1 seed in mind, knowing that if they do win and the Bills beat the Lions in Detroit, they'll be tied at the top of the NFC with 3 weeks to play. But remember, AFC games, they're not going to factor in when it comes to the big picture because right now the Lions, who had the 1 loss against Tampa, obviously an NFC opponent, but the Eagles have their 2 losses, both against NFC opponents. So even if they do get tied for some way, shape, or form this week, one more time, if Philadelphia beats Pittsburgh and Buffalo beats Detroit, yes, they'll be tied at the top. But because the conference record will bode well and in favor of the Lions, they will still have the 1 seed, even if they do lose this week and Philadelphia prevails against Pittsburgh. And mind you that Pittsburgh has never won in Philadelphia throughout the course of their history. Think about it. For them to try to break this snide now would be great, even though a loss in the conference or out of conference would not hurt them in the big picture. But it would be nice for them to go into Philly against that opponent to finally get a win in the city of brotherly love. So that we'll have to wait and see. And those are big games. Buffalo, Detroit, we understand that could be a Super Bowl preview as we talked about. And I actually picked Detroit to beat Buffalo. Check those receipts all the way back prior to week 1 as my Super Bowl prediction. Let's see if that fares down the road. Yes, I would rather choose Philly and Pittsburgh only because I'd rather see the Steelers get there. But with that being said, I think both of those games are going to be good games. Let's see if Pittsburgh, I think it's going to be more of a challenge for Pittsburgh to win in Philly than for Buffalo to win in Detroit. I think they could go into Detroit and win. That's not to say Pittsburgh can't do that in Philadelphia. But I think with everything that has transpired, as I mentioned about 7 minutes ago at the top, where with all that's gone on in the locker room and the presence of possibly some dissension there between the quarterback and the wide receiver, that's been squashed. So I'm sure they could breathe a sigh of relief, exhale, and then get back on the field, considering that their passing is ranked near the bottom. I believe it's actually last in the NFL. And watch them come out in a flurry and try to show the world that there isn't any beef between Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, that everything is copacetic. And the next thing you know, watch it be 17-0 Philadelphia midway through the second quarter with 2 touchdown passes by Jalen Hurts. So those are 2 big games. Looking forward to seeing how that's going to unfold. Tonight you have a big one there in the NFC West, and this is the last stand for the Niners. And with all the injuries and with all of them just trying to piecemeal it together, whether that means the quarterback who has been back but also has been dinged up. We know about what happened with Brandon Ayuk earlier this year. Christian McCaffrey is done. Debo's been in and out of the lineup, and Debo also made a comment too where he had to squash and even delete a tweet in reference to what's been going on there in San Francisco, more so with the offense as well. But for the Niners, they need to win this game in the worst way. They're 1-3 in the division. They already lost to the Rams earlier this year. And at 6-7 and a game behind the Rams, in order for them to stay afloat in the division, they must win this game. Now, it's in their building, and you would think that with all that has happened here over the first 13, 14 weeks, that they could certainly turn their season around with these final 4 weeks, starting with a win tonight. But the Rams, they've played well. They've done a good job. Now, they've been inconsistent because just when you think that they're going to win a game or play well, that's when they kind of take a step back. And yes, they did lose to the Rams a couple of weeks ago, to the Eagles a couple of weeks ago on Sunday night, but then they bounced back with a big win there against the Buffalo Bills, as you saw there at SoFi. So now on a short week, can Sean McVay, Matt Stafford and company go up the coast and get another game to put the Niners out to pasture? You would think for sure. I think the Niners, with their toughness and even with them banged up, I think they're going to find a way to win this game tonight. I wouldn't be shocked if the Rams win. And there's a part of me that wants the Rams to win because I don't want to see any part of the Niners. I'm done with them. And even though we could talk about chief fatigue and for them to pull these games out of their rear end the way they have throughout the course of these last few weeks, but the Niners, I don't want them anywhere near the postseason. And even if they do get in, who knows? Maybe if they do get healthy, they could have a run in them, but I don't want them to even get to that point. But for tonight, I think the Niners will find a way because they know that if they lose this game, that's it. Their season's going to be done. They're going to have no shot to make it into the postseason. And not only that, but they will actually be 2.5 games behind the Seattle Seahawks because the Seahawks are 8-5, and they're done with the Seahawks. Remember, they split the regular season series against them, and the Seahawks have a very good record in the division. So for the Niners, this is their last day in the night to see whether or not, if they win, they'll still have an outside shot to be a part of this playoff mix or even win a division for that matter. But if not, it'll be curtains for them. So you have that to start. The rest of the schedule after the other 2 games that I mentioned, you have Indianapolis at Denver, which is a very low-key good game. And people can say, what, Jay Reels, are you serious? The Colts are under 500. They're 6-7. And yes, the Broncos have played well here. But why would this be an important or even a matchup that we would have to focus in on? Well, the one big reason is that if the Colts win this game, they will be a game back of the Broncos as far as the race goes because they'll be 7-7 and the Broncos will be 8-6. And the Broncos' schedule down the stretch is tricky. They still have to go to Cincinnati. They do play Kansas City in their building. All right, which obviously the Chiefs, maybe they owe them one for what happened there at Arrowhead when they blocked that that field goal there to end the game, which would have, at that time, they were undefeated and would have snapped their, I believe, 8-0 start at the time. But the Broncos with the Bengals, which is not going to be an easy game, despite the fact that they have an outside shot there to see if they could sneak in and run the table. But for them, sandwiched in between that game is the Chargers, where they have to go to LA, and that's actually next week. My apologies. So they have to play the Colts in their building, then go to LA to play the Chargers, at Bengals, and then home the Chiefs. And the Colts down the stretch, their schedule, if they do beat the Broncos there on Sunday, their schedule is a cakewalk. They will host the Titans, at the Giants, and then Jacksonville to conclude their season. They can run the table. Now, I understand Anthony Richardson, although you do have Joe Flacco waiting in the wings, but if they get past this game, they have a very good shot to get to 10 wins. And if they end up tied with the Broncos, guess who has the tiebreaker? Obviously, the Colts will if they do win on Sunday. So that's why this is a big game. If the Colts had a tricky schedule or an opponent that you knew was going to be tough for them to beat, all right, you would still have to pay attention to the Colts even if they did beat Denver, but they still have a tough game on the schedule. They do not. And the Broncos, as I just mentioned, they have honestly 3 tough games down the stretch. And even though you could say, the Bengals, they can go to Cincinnati and win. But if the Bengals are still in it and knowing that they have tiebreakers, that if they do beat the Broncos, that's going to be big for them to see where they fall at that point. So for argument's sake, let's say if the Colts win and let's say that they go to LA and they lose to the Chargers. With the Bengals, let's say, winning their next 2 games, they will have a shot. So all is not lost there for the Bengals if they do get to that point where they win a game here on Sunday and then they'll have to face the Colts down the road, the Broncos down the road. Anything can happen. That's why that game is an enormous game in the AFC. Granted, it's for the bottom and the last playoff spot in the AFC, but that is one that certainly is going to mean a ton when it comes to Indianapolis, Denver, and them trying to qualify and clinch a berth there in the conference. Besides that, you don't really have a lot of other games. I know Miami and Houston in the 1 o'clock window. That's probably the only game at 1 o'clock that anybody will pay attention to because Miami, after them trying to get themselves back at 6-7, winning against the Jets there on Sunday, they need this game. And they, just like the Bengals, have to run the table in order for them to possibly get in the postseason. And then Houston, let's see what happens. They're coming off a bye. Maybe that bodes well as they needed to resync and get themselves refocused here for this final stretch. But other than that, the 1 o'clock window is from hunger. Kansas City at Cleveland. Can Cleveland pull off an upset here? Maybe, but Jameis Winston, the quarterback? I don't think so. Cincinnati, Tennessee, Washington, New Orleans, the Ravens coming off a bye in their own right. Same for the Commanders as well, going down to the Bayou. But Ravens visiting the Giants, Dallas at Carolina, the Jets in Jacksonville. I mean, that is a 1 o'clock window that, go Christmas shopping. Don't even bother. But then you want to get back by 4:25 to watch those games that I mentioned. And you do have New England and Arizona for those who care. Also part of that 4:25 window. Your Sunday night game, not a bad one. Green Bay at Seattle. Let's see if Seattle could beat the Packers here. And the Packers had that 10-day layoff after losing to the Lions there on Thursday night, a week ago today. And the Seahawks, let's see if they could separate themselves from the pack there, whether it be the Rams, obviously the Niners, if they do win tonight. Let's see if they can gain some separation there so that it is a big game, not a 5-star, nothing like Buffalo, Detroit, or even Pittsburgh, Philly for that matter, but it's a game worth watching. And then you have the dreaded doubleheader Monday night games, which obviously we won't talk about until we get to next Thursday's podcast. But you have Chicago at Minnesota. All right, the Bears flailing here down the stretch. And the Vikings trying to see if they can keep pace with the Lions in the NFC North. And then Atlanta, talk about a team that is just reeling, going to the desert to play Las Vegas against another team that, although they've been competitive, but certainly out to sea in the Las Vegas Raiders. And that pretty much wraps up your NFL Week 15. You know, we'll cover everything that will transpire from tonight through Sunday night on Monday's podcast. So that's what you have there with the National Football League. Anything else I could say? Oh, yeah, let me bring this up here for a hot second. So Berlin, add them to the list of international games that will be played next year in the NFL. We've seen them go to Frankfurt. We've seen them play in Munich, and now they're going to go to Berlin as the NFL tries to expand and get the game more global. Now, you know how I feel about this, people. I'm not trying to soak out another ounce of juice from a lemon that's already been squeezed too many times, as I've discussed this ad nauseum. But the NFL is NFLing again as they try to go to another city in Germany, and Berlin is the next stop. Obviously, we don't know what team's going to be playing there, but for those who care, Berlin is one that we'll have to look forward to as far as the schedule in 2025. Now let me move over to the college ranks, as we had a big story here unfold over the last 24 hours. Now, you only have the one game, Army-Navy, Saturday down in Landover, where the Commanders play. And of course, Commanders are on the road, so they could have the stadium to themselves. But besides that, you also have the Heisman Trophy, which has Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, Ashton Gentry from Boise State, the running back. You also have Travis Hunter, the two-way player from Colorado, and Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami. Now, we would think that it's going to go to Travis Hunter, considering the success Colorado's had. Now, they're not a part of the college football playoff, unlike Gentry, who is a part of it, as we know, with Boise State, and Dylan Gabriel as a 1 seed overall there for Oregon, and Cam Ward, who certainly had played well and looked like they were going to make it into the playoff, but obviously fell short. But I think Hunter was probably going to be a winner, considering he's a receiver and a DB. So you're going to have a two-way player, we would think, Saturday night there at the New York Athletic Club, win the Heisman Trophy for best college player. But the big story in college football has to be Bill Belichick back on the sidelines, but North Carolina and college? So much to unpack here when it comes to the future Hall of Fame quarterback, or future Hall of Fame quarterback. You hear me, people? What's wrong with me? Future Hall of Fame coach. Get it together here, J Reels. Now, we could talk about why. Why college? Why North Carolina? Well, there is a connection there in North Carolina where his dad was an assistant in the 50s with the Tar Heels. So that's one reason, and I'm sure Belichick had flirted or really entertained the thought of wanting to go back to North Carolina to coach that institution, to be a part of that school. And if that's one of the reasons, or one of the many reasons, then fine. And he hasn't had the press conference yet, as the nooses came down last night. So I'm sure once he's in front of the media, a lot of that's going to be asked, and I'm sure he's going to answer it. Now, how much is he going to give you? Is he going to be the Bill Belichick of the pro circuit, where he gave you nothing and then he gave you really much? Will he be the type of guy where, oh, my dad coached here and that's it, I just want to talk about the team, not talk about myself? Who knows? Or maybe will Belichick, because he's had dabbled here in the media and has done a lot over the course of these last few months with Manning casts and Inside the NFL and other things, to where maybe he's going to open up a little bit to the media about this opportunity, about how his dad was on the coaching staff there back in the 50s. And it'd be nice. Hopefully he will do that and kind of give us a little insight and why he chose North Carolina, and not just for the sake of wanting to coach. Now, you also have the NFL side of it. Was it a situation where there weren't many jobs, even though there's going to be a ton of job openings here once we get to the first Monday after the regular season, whether that be in Chicago, whether that be, now, of course, not going to be a situation with the Jets. The Giants, will they get rid of Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, the GM? And even though there have been rumblings that he probably wouldn't even go back to the Giants if the position did open up, but you have a bunch of other places where you're going to have maybe Jacksonville with Peterson out, and you still have Trevor Lawrence there, although obviously hurt and not going to play the rest of the year, but a guy that you could certainly look forward to groom and maybe get him to play at his ultimate potential. With all these positions open, maybe he looked at it as like, I don't want to go back to the NFL with these cities and with these teams having openings to not his liking. So therefore came the situation in North Carolina, and even though you could think in the back of your mind, he's what, about 14, 16 games? I don't know exactly how far away he is from surpassing Don Shula as the winningest coach in NFL history, but obviously that wasn't a big deal, because if that was the case, he would have taken any one of these jobs, New Orleans being another one. He would have taken these jobs just to try to get closer to Shula and maybe surpass him in the next couple of years. But I'm sure he felt going back to college to go to where his father once coached, where I'm sure he's looking down on him to say, son, now it's your time. Maybe there's that connection and that synergy for Belichick to go back. And then his son, who's in the coaching ranks in the NFL, maybe he'll be able to take him aboard and then maybe to hand that lineage down to Steve Belichick in order for him to take over once Bill, and I don't know what the terms, how long he's going to be there for. Is it just going to be 3 years? I mean, he is 73 years of age, so it's not as if they're going to give him an 8-year deal, but maybe they give him 3, 4, 5 years tops, I would think, and then maybe pass the baton off to his son, Steve. Maybe that's what's going on here. But now the bigger thing that I think about when it comes to Belichick taking this position, because, okay, NFL, I didn't like the jobs, and I didn't like the landscape. All right, fine. North Carolina, for all the ties, the family ties that he has there, all right, no problem. But why college? Why go to a situation and a system where it pretty much doesn't bode well, despite the fact that, yes, if you are in the SEC and you are in a big school where you know you're going to garner a lot of attention and have a lot of recruits want to come play for your school. And with Belichick, the name says it all. And who knows, maybe in that region, the parents of these kids are going to just try to flock to Chapel Hill to say, I want my son to be coached by you, Mr. Belichick. All right, fantastic. But with the way the system is now, with NILs and transfer portals and players wanting to go here, there, similar to what Dion has done in Colorado, I understand. But for Belichick at 73 years of age, I get it that he doesn't have to walk into some kid's living room and try to coerce the parents to have him come to play at his university. All right, fine. But the same deal with NILs and with transfer portals. Who wants to play in North Carolina? Granted that the conference isn't great and the competition isn't stiff, that maybe Belichick this time next year could win a conference and maybe even get into the playoff. Now, will they go up against the big bad Georgia Bulldogs and Texas Longhorns and Alabama Crimson Tides and the Oregon Ducks and Penn States, Ohio States of the world, and be able to go past that gauntlet in order for them to get themselves set up for a semifinal, or dare I even say a national championship? The likelihood of that happening are slim and none, unless he's going to get some big-time players, including a big-time quarterback, as you know. I get it. The name carries a lot of weight. Your last name is Belichick, and you're going to a school that could thrive with the right pieces in a conference that is, let's face it, it is not good. But that is a lot to undertake if you're going to be a coach and in a system that is very fluid. And for players that want to go here, there, maybe play with friends, oh, wait, that school's going to offer me more money, or that situation is going to be a lot better for me, they're going to do that in a heartbeat. Even if your name is Belichick, your name could be Lombardi for that matter, and I'm sure he would have a tough time. And then lastly, think about this. One of Bill Belichick's closest friends, and I'm sure he's consulted with him, and they probably have had many conversations, and I'm sure bottles of wine and broke bread and everything when it comes to talking about the college landscape. And that is the one Nick Saban. Saban and Belichick are like this. They are tight. Remember, many years ago, Nick Saban was the defensive coordinator on a Cleveland Brown team that Bill Belichick coached in the mid-90s. So do the math, people. They go way back. And I'm sure he has asked Nick Saban, is this a good move? Should I do this? Should I not? What are the ramifications? Saban obviously retired last year based in part because of how the system does not play well for, granted that they're Alabama and they could get anybody, but I'm sure he was fed up knowing that a lot of these players weren't going to be funneled into Tuscaloosa, that they were going to go elsewhere based on the transfer portal and the NIL situation. That's all there is to it. And for Belichick to want to dive into that pool says a lot about him. And I get it, North Carolina is sentimental to him. And I think that would be first and foremost before NILs and transfer portals. But that is a huge factor in this whole deal for Belichick wanting to coach the college ranks. Because if he can't get top players, if he can't get a big-time quarterback, if he can't get a pass rusher, if he can't get a system that's going to work for him and have those players that he's able to coach, then he's going to have a lot of 7-5 seasons. And yes, he's going to play in a bowl that nobody's going to care about. Yeah, they may care and watch because he'll be coaching, but he's not going to be coaching on the grand stage where you want to see Belichick coach in that playoff for a chance to advance and maybe even get to a national championship. So you have all that factors in and ties in, which is fascinating to say the least. Skipping the NFL, why college, why North Carolina, we know that, and then because of the way the system is. So we'll see. I'm sure the press conference is going to be in the coming days, and a lot will probably be answered at that time. Hopefully, like I said, Belichick will open up. It should be interesting, and if he does open up, obviously we'll get a little bit of insight and just a feeling on why and with the system, etc. And hopefully he does reveal all that's going to be asked, because as a fan, I'm curious. And I'm not even in the media in that regard where I'm going to be in the room and asking him questions, but I would like to know why, considering that a lot of these coaches have just said, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I want out. Saban in particular. So that's what you have with the college. And lastly, with Carson Beck, it's been rumored that he may have torn ligaments in that elbow that he suffered on that hit at the end of the first half in the SEC championship game against Texas. So that elbow injury, now there's no timetable. Nothing has been confirmed as far as his elbow, whether or not it is torn, and if that's the case, obviously he's not going to play. But we still don't know that. We'll have to wait and see. Again, that's just been conjecture, and that's just a situation where we're going to have to wait. If it's a thing where it's a partial tear, can he play through it? We don't know that yet, and who knows? We may not even know until we get to game time, or at least the couple days before game time, where Georgia obviously has a bye, and the college football playoff will begin in earnest a week from tomorrow. So you know I'll be all over that as we get closer to that game. All right, now I'm going to put on my batting gloves and get into the batter's box. I got to talk baseball here because we're probably not going to talk much about it unless you get some big signings, the Corbin Burns of the world, and a few of the guys that are out there. But I have to get into what has gone on with baseball, because with the winter meetings concluding today in Dallas, and it's been rather quiet. And I get it, you had the thunderous boom of Juan Soto there Sunday night, which I talked about on Monday's podcast, which led off the podcast. And I want to talk about Soto. I'll get to that at the end because, mind you, that took place Sunday night. I came on the airwaves Monday morning to record. So, yes, I gave you my feelings on the deal, on what it meant to the organization, what the Yankees will do. And obviously, I'm going to segue to that in a second. But I want to talk about just the vitriol and just the senseless narrative. And I understand it may be easier for me to say because I'm a Met fan, but I'm going to unpack that in a few minutes about just celebrities and fans just really saying nasty things toward Soto. Not even toward, you just took the money and ran, blah, blah. All right, fine, that's a little personal. But they got really personal, which I'll get to in a second. But the Yankees, they signed Max Fried. To me, that is a rebound signing. It's a good signing, but it makes you wonder, because they lost out on Soto, and yes, they did upgrade their rotation, but did they have to give him 8 years? Forget about the money. We understand $218 million. It's the most for a left-handed starting pitcher in Major League Baseball history, if that means anything, which was $1 million more than what David Price got from the Red Sox when he signed, what was it, back in 15, 16, whatever it was. But for Max Fried, very good pitcher. I look at him as I said a rich man's Cole Hamels, if you remember him from his days in Philadelphia. He's probably equal to Cole Hamels because he was a very good pitcher, crafty lefty, didn't really throw hard, but had a very good curveball, spotted his fastball, had that cut fastball, an array of pitches. And to me, that's Max Fried. He is Cole Hamels here, 2020, if you want to say, or in the 20s during this decade. But the one warning I'd have about Max Fried is that although he's put up good numbers and he's won postseason games, including winning a World Series in 2021 at Game 6 in Houston where he went 6 shutout innings. But Fried is a guy that has an injury history. And with forearms and elbow strains, which is not good. Now, thankfully, he did not have to go under the knife for Tommy John. But because he's had an occurrence of the forearm and elbow, I would have to proceed with caution. And he's 31 years of age. And you sign an 8-year deal, which is going to take him to age 39. So that is a buyer beware if you ask me. And that's why that was a rebound signing. Now, I understand he's in need. But did they have to give him 8 years? Could they have not given him 5 years? Look at what Blake Snell got. 5 for 182. And Snell is, I think, 29, 30 years old. He's close to that age. But Fried right now, I believe, when the start of the season, he'll be 31. So he has a year or two on Snell. And Snell at least has 2 Cy Youngs in his back pocket, despite the fact he's a high-volume pitcher, doesn't really go past 5, let alone 6 innings, and is a guy that could strike out the world, but at the same time walk the ballpark. But with Fried, he's a guy that's more economic, hits his spots, wicked curveball, more of a command pitcher. And if he's off his command, you can say that about every pitcher, of course. But Fried has a very good track record and a very good resume. But the injury history would scare me. And it's not as if he's had obliques or nagging injuries, let's say hamstrings or things of that nature. No, when it's forearm and elbow, to me, that is a red flag. And that's not to say he's going to get injured, and it's not wishing him to be injured, but you do have to proceed with caution on whether or not Fried, throughout the length of this contract, is not going to have a situation where he may be put on the IL for a period or two throughout. Just putting it out there, people, because Fried, who pitched in the NL East, obviously against my Mets, that's one you certainly have to pay attention to if you're a Yankee fan. And then the other big note was yesterday where the Red Sox, they had to do something, and they did the right thing by forcing a trade. I don't want to say forcing, but they made a transaction with the Chicago White Sox, which they did once upon a time to get Chris Sale, another lefty. Well, now they bring in Garrett Crochet from the Pale Hose to be a part of the Red Sox, and for them to get their stud pitcher. Right away, he's your ace, number 1 starter, to go along with guys like Cutter Crawford, and I don't know if you're going to get anything out of Lucas Giolito, who's coming off of Tommy John. Guys like that. Brian Bellows, another one who they signed to a long-term deal. Not big money. What was it, 5 for about 50-something million? I think even less than that. But now you have Crochet. He still has 2 years before he becomes a free agent. I know that if you're the GM, Craig Breslow, you're going to do whatever it takes to sign him on a dotted line. And you're going to have to sign him. He's young. He's 26 years old, so they're going to look at that Max Fried contract, 8 years and $218 million, and I'm sure that's going to be the jump off, and maybe even more because of his age. Not into his prime. Yes, last year was his first full year of being a starting pitcher. Prior to that, he was more of a setup guy, reliever. So the Red Sox got their guy. Now they have to do more. They have to maybe get another starter in there and also upgrade the offense, although they do have some good offensive players there. Who knows? Are they going to flirt with Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? That's a guy that has been on their radar for some time, because in order for them to keep up with the Yankees and even with the Orioles, Rays, not so much, and the Blue Jays, they bring in Andres Jimenez from the Guardians, and again, right now they're in flux because they're a team that was looking at Ohtani last year, they were looking at Soto this year, and obviously we're 0 for 2 there. And who knows, do they just blow it up and start over for a team that does have good pitching with the likes of Jose Barrios and also Kevin Gausman, guys like that. But if you're the Red Sox, you just cannot stop here. You're going to have to continue to try to build this team. You're going to have to continue to try to do what you can to fortify that rotation. Yes, Crochet's a good start, but there's a lot of work to be done. Similar to the Mets by getting Soto, but there's still a lot of work to be had here between now and when pitchers and catchers report, roughly 2 months from today. And now that's going to lead me to Soto. I'll get to a couple other things. Arenado's another one that I want to discuss, and some other minor deals that have taken place, but I want to get to Soto for this reason. Now on Monday, as I mentioned earlier, I talked about the signing and what it meant to the organization, what it meant to the Met fan, what it means to the Yankees and what they have to do. But to think and to listen and to read all of this nonsense from Yankee fans and even celebrities for that matter. And I'll shout out Nick Turturro. And then people can say, Nick Turturro, what? Who is he? Yeah, I know Nick Turturro's not his brother John, but we know he is a rabid Yankee fan. And for him to come out to say the things he said toward Juan Soto, I mean, seriously? And I get it. What are fans? Fans are fanatics. But let me put this in perspective, people. He was a free agent. This is the first time that he had an opportunity to go on the free market and get the most money that he can. Now, yes, Yankee fans can be angry because the offer that was presented to Scott Boras and Soto was certainly one that if it wasn't the Mets, he would have been a Yankee. Now, you can nitpick here with the dollars. 16 years for $760 million and with the Met deal, 15 for $765. Now, the Mets gave him $75 million bonus, which was $15 million more than what the Yankees were going to provide. And you could even argue that they did take off the 1 year, or maybe the Mets didn't add that 16th year, but they said, we'll give you 15, but we'll add more money. And then on top of that, with his opt-out, he can make as much as $805 million. So I don't know what the Yankees presented an opt-out at 5 years and was comparable to what the Met deal was going to be. But the Met deal was more handsome. If anything, you can't knock Hal, you can't knock Brian Cashman, I get it. But it was just a matter of Steve Cohen saying, I'll match that and go above and beyond that. And that's what they did. And you can't knock Hal, you can't even knock Juan Soto for that. And yes, do you want to nitpick and say, because they wouldn't offer a suite to Juan Soto, they did not do that for Derek Jeter, they haven't done that for Aaron Judge, so why would they do that for Soto? All right, if that's one of the reasons that Soto didn't sign, okay. You could say, what's a suite? Are you serious? He could just pay for it out of the money that the Yankees are giving it to him. As you know, players aren't going to do that. And then on top of that, supposedly there was this report about a security guard not treating the Soto family right, or there was maybe some sort of back and forth or tension between a security guard and Soto and his family, and that was one of the reasons. I mean, listen, if that was a one-time deal, that can't be the main or one of the main reasons why Soto decided to go to Queens instead of staying in the Bronx. All right, was the suite a big deal? All right, fine. Was $75 million guaranteed better for him than 60? All right, fine. Well, he took the money. As we know, that contract, by the time he gets to year 9, 10, 11, 12, and beyond, it's going to be an albatross. We understand that, even with Soto at the age of 26. But for all the vitriol and the FUs and the you're the worst and why this, why that, etc., stop. You could be upset at him not taking the deal. You could be upset that, you just took every last red penny. You weren't a Yankee 1 year and you decided to hit the road. You could have stayed with Yankee tradition and the pinstripes and you had Judge. All right, fine. All that other stuff, making it personal, please. And here's my example. When Darryl Strawberry in 1990 left to go back home to LA, I was despondent. Darryl was my guy, my all-time favorite Met. In fact, the next day, I went to work in a Darryl Strawberry Met t-shirt with black tape around my left arm to show that it was a day in mourning as a Met fan. Did I curse at Darryl? Did I say, you're a bum, that you're dead to me, burning jerseys, burning newspaper front pages or back pages, things of that nature? No, I didn't do that. And I'm a kook, people. I do this for a living. I did not look at Darryl, and I understand that's 35 years ago, and you could say, well, please, that was another lifetime. But still, I'm the same rabid, kook, crazy sports fan then that I am now. So why would I even do that? Why would I even curse out a player? Why would I say, whatever, F you to you and your family? And that's go. Look at Nick Turturro's page. I'm shouting him out on Instagram. You would think that Soto had a relationship with Turturro and told him in his face that I'm a Yankee, I'm not going anywhere, I promise, this is my team, Judge is my guy, these are my teammates, and then he shunned them to go to Queens. Seriously, come on, people. Now, let me get to Nolan Arenado real quick. Arenado now is part of a deal where he's looking to get out of St. Louis and is even willing to play first base. But here's the deal. If you're Steve Cohen, and even if you're Hal Steinbrenner, don't go anywhere near this guy. And not because he wants out, similar to when he wanted out of Colorado. I like Arenado. The guy is going to be a Hall of Famer, I would think. I get it. He's not going to get 500 home runs or 3,000 hits or anything like that, but he is a 10-time Gold Glove first baseman, 8-time All-Star, Silver Sluggers, I'm sure, all that. But Arenado's 33 years old. He's on the other side of the mountain. Granted that he's not all the way at the bottom or near the bottom, but look at the numbers he had last year. He was, 15 and 79. He batted, I don't even know what he batted, 260? A far cry from his heyday in Colorado. And, of course, we could talk about the altitude and the balls flying out of Coors Field. But you don't want to have players on your team, despite the fact that he has a resume. But you want to get younger. You want to get athletic. And I understand that if he's in a good lineup, you don't have to bank on Arenado to be the guy that's going to be the savior of your lineup, of your team. But still, you don't want to pay this guy in upwards of $25, $30 million a year where you're going to get a pittance to what he once did back in the heyday of his career when he was in his mid-20s. So, yes, maybe you could go to the Red Sox. And even then, I wouldn't do that because if you put him at third, you can move him over to first base, Rafael Devers, that is. And I understand you got Tristan Casas. Who knows what you're going to do with him. But still, if I'm a GM, I wouldn't go anywhere near him. And even if he comes back 30 cents on the dollar, I still wouldn't do it. Only because I'm not going to get that 30, 100 production and Gold Glove defense. I still may get that, but how's his range? 33 years old. He's been in the majors for, 11 years? So I would stay away. Nothing personal against Arenado. I just wouldn't do it just based age, wanting to get younger, more athletic, and that's all it is when it comes to Arenado. All right, now let me turn my attention over to the association as I lace up the high tops and get cracking on what's happening there. Now, all that's happened this week has been the NBA Cup. And I have to talk about this, people. Saturday night, you have your semifinal set where the Milwaukee Bucks, and they continue their torrid pace. They're going to go up against the Atlanta Hawks, who beat the Knicks in the Garden. And Trae Young continues to be the villain, which I'm sure he's relishing, with all of his histrionics skipping across the court and rolling the dice on the Knick logo as if he's saying, yep, I'm going to Vegas. As he had 22 points, 11 assists last night to get the Knicks out of the NBA Cup. And I can't wait for this thing to be over. I can't even watch these games on these courts. These courts are just blinding. I mean, the oranges and the reds, and it's just, how can you watch 5 minutes of this without just flinching or having to squint your eyes? It is just rough. And I understand this is in-season tournament. It's different. They want to jazz it up a little bit, but can you not blind us in the process? I talked about this last year, but anyway, I digress. And then you had on Tuesday night, you had the Bucks as well as the Oklahoma City Thunder behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scoring 39, getting past the Mavericks, a team that he has deep in his heart because he even talked about a little bit of a revenge factor losing to them in the conference semifinals last year. So for OKC to advance, and then you had the Rockets, a little bit of controversy at the end of the game yesterday where the Warriors had a 1-point lead with seconds to go, and Curry took a three to try to put the dagger into the Rockets. He missed, and then there was a scrum where a loose ball foul came about where Jonathan Kuminga fouled Jalen Green and had the coach Steve Kerr on the sideline exasperated with his jaw hitting the Toyota Center floor, and in the postgame railed against the officiating, said he'd never seen a loose ball foul 90 feet from the basket ever in his life, stormed off of the press conference. I'm sure he's going to get fined for that. And in watching the video where Kuminga, where he fouled him, I don't know. I get it that everybody's trying to get the ball. Jalen Green's trying to call a timeout. Kuminga, they're flailing. You see arms and legs and elbows. And to me, it's a bang-bang play. It wasn't an obvious foul. It wasn't anything that was worthy of a foul. And therefore, Jalen Green sinks 2 clutch free throws and then a desperation 3 to end the game. And the Rockets advance to play the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the Warriors go off into the night disgruntled, upset, frustrated that they were unable to advance. And even for whatever the reason, in the postgame, Steve Kerr said he was looking forward to going to Vegas. He wanted to go. And I guess that's a good thing. But considering the Warriors and their pedigree and him winning 4 titles, maybe he wanted to have an NBA in-season cup championship to go along with that. Listen, if you're Steve Kerr, fine. All right, that's great. I'm sure he wanted to advance. Didn't want to lose the game, and especially in that fashion. But how I look at it is that I would think the championship is a lot more important than trying to win a meaningless in-season tournament. So kudos to you, Steve Kerr. I know, tough break there and how they lost that game. But now your semifinals set Saturday in Vegas. I know the schedule will pick up, and I'll talk about the schedule in a minute as we take a look at the weekend. But Saturday in Vegas, you had the 2 games. I think it's 6 and 9:30, or is it 6:30 and 9? Let me take a quick look at that here as we take a peek. Schedule for the NBA. Of course, the connection here is slow. NBA people. NBA as I get to that. Well, anyway, I'll get to that in a second as for whatever the reason it's asleep. Oh, here we go. Saturday, you have, actually it's earlier than that, Atlanta and Milwaukee 4:30, and I get it because they play in the same building, so there has to be some turnover. First game, 4:30 TNT, and then your nightcap is Houston, Oklahoma City, 8:30 on ABC. You're not going to have the final until Tuesday night, and I don't think those teams are going to have any games between that time and then. As I look at it here, the schedule tomorrow, or tonight, Detroit, Boston, Toronto, Miami. I'll get to Miami in a second. Some interesting news coming out of Heatland. Sacramento, New Orleans. You have the Lakers in Minnesota tomorrow night. No ESPN games to speak of. Clippers in Denver. And Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, you don't really have a lot there in the NBA. New York and Orlando. Dallas at Golden State. Yeah, you got nothing. Cleveland at Brooklyn. That's Monday. But Sunday, yeah, Saturday, obviously you have the 2 games. So, yeah, not a lot in the NBA to speak of over the weekend. So you're going to concentrate there or focus in on the semifinals there Saturday. But now you have an interesting development out of Miami to where the agent for Jimmy Butler has come up with a list of teams that Jimmy Butler would like to be traded to. Now, I don't know what the hierarchy there, if you're Pat Riley, Mickey Harrison, the owner and company, what you're going to do. I don't know how upset, or does Jimmy Butler really want out at this point? Now, he did not get an extension this past offseason because he's getting $49 million this year, and he has a player option for next year at $52 million. So it's not as if he's going to be broke, but he was hoping to go into this season with a 3-year extension comparable to what we saw Giannis get, the 3-year, $180 million range, or somewhere between 160 and 180. And because of comments that, and this is to me what it stems from, comments that Jimmy Butler made where he didn't even suit up against the Celtics in the first round, where he expressed his thoughts about if he was playing, they would have beaten the Knicks and beaten the Celtics, to where the Heat lost in 5. And then Pat Riley came out days after the Heat departure in the first round saying that he shouldn't have said anything and had no business saying anything, paraphrasing of course, because he didn't even suit up. He didn't even have an impact in any of the games or in the series in order for him to say something like that. So he needs to pipe down. Obviously, Butler, I'm sure privately, was not happy about that, and therefore showed up at training camp and pretty much have played a low profile when it comes to contracts and comes to maybe possibly going elsewhere. Well, now, without an extension, and I think coupled with those offseason comments, the list that he has that he wants to be traded to are out west, whether that's Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, or Golden State. Now, are the Heat going to honor that request? Are they going to paint themselves in a corner to where now Butler's going to sit out? He's going to lose money. He just can't voluntarily sit out and wait for a trade unless the Heat decide to put him on a phantom injury report where, he can't play due to tendonitis in his knee, where they're just biding time to try to find a suitor in order to get Butler shipped out of Miami. Now, what they're going to get back in return is beyond me, because think about this. Although Butler, well-conditioned, excellent player, when the money's on the line, he's a guy that has delivered and has come. Now, he hasn't won a championship, but we know what Butler is capable of. But here's the thing. He's 35 years old. Now, you're going to have to take a bad contract back, as well as maybe a good young player or two. I don't know about draft picks or things of that nature. Now, I'm sure they're going to try to pluck a draft pick. I would think they'd want to go maybe to a team that's young like Houston, where maybe they could pluck a player from that team. And not to say they're going to give up anybody young. There's no way Jalen Green's going to go back in a deal, or even Sengun, another guy that just got a big deal there by the Rockets. But maybe there's another couple of players that he could try to extract from Houston to bring on to the Heat. But I wouldn't trade him with Golden State. Now, Golden State has young players too, but I don't know if they're going to be willing to part with them either, as they're trying to build something, although they've hit an abutment here over the last 3-4 weeks after a torrid start. Phoenix, there's nobody on that team that I would take. I'm sure Phoenix would love to ship Bradley Beal to Miami, but I don't think they want any part of him, considering how much money he's going to be owed over these next few years. And then, even with a team like Dallas, all right, you want maybe Derek Lively, but I don't think they're going to want to give up Derek Lively. We know about Luka, Kyrie, and even Klay Thompson for that matter, but whatever young players that they have, there's no way that they're going to want to give up, considering they just came off of a finals run. So I would think Houston may be the team that they want to target and may have a better shot of getting players off their roster. I don't know, maybe Golden State winging a prayer that they would be willing to part with Jonathan Kuminga. I don't know about that, or a player of that ilk. Who knows? But Butler, let's see what's going to happen here, whether or not there's going to be an impasse. There's going to be a standoff at the OK Corral where there's going to be a game of chicken, whether Butler has to continue to play and wait for his time to be called upon to be shipped out of town, or if it's a deal where Butler's that aggravated, frustrated, etc., where he's telling the front office, I'm sitting out, put me on the injury report, etc., and they're going to acquiesce and do so. So keep in mind, let's see how quickly this will take place. Let's see if this will just blow over. Who knows? And maybe there could be a meeting of the minds between Eric Spoelstra, Pat Riley, and company to just wait out this year. Who knows? But let's see if that's going to be a soap opera to keep an eye on there in South Beach to see whether or not Butler does get traded here in the coming days, or let's say prior to the trade deadline in the early part of February. So you got that cooking. And then with the NHL, as I lace up my skates and go around the National Hockey League, not much really to get into here. I know the Avalanche, for whatever the reason, they're trying to find a goaltender here as they spin the roulette wheel, and right now it's coming up small. They made a deal a couple of weeks ago where they got a backup goalie and a one Scott Wedgwood. They traded backups where they obtained Wedgwood for Justice Anunen. I can't pronounce his name. And that was a deal I think they made with, if I'm not mistaken, it could have been with Seattle. I may be off on that. I have to go back and check that. But now they made another deal where they bring in Mackenzie Blackwood, the former Devil netminder, and they shipped Alexander Georgiev, the former Ranger that they got in a deal there a couple of years ago. So Georgiev is out. He gets shipped to San Jose, where you got Blackwood coming over in the deal, and now will probably be the starter for Colorado as they try to get their season in sync. And a team that a lot of people thought could have come out of the West, or at least have a deep run in them, right now they're kind of in the middle of the pack there in the Western Conference. Let's see if Blackwood, so they change one wood for another, Wedgwood for Blackwood, and whether or not that he's going to be the answer, that we'll have to wait and see. But Blackwood obviously does have a resume, has played in the league a long time, most notably here with the Devils and now San Jose. I don't know if that's going to be a significant upgrade. I know Georgiev obviously was a guy that they were banking on to be the future of their at that position. And with Philip Grubauer, remember him, who won the cup there back in 2022. And for them at that time not get anywhere close to a cup final, let's see if Blackwood is going to be that guy that at least could jumpstart this Avalanche team that had big aspirations to get themselves back to a Stanley Cup. And granted, we're only in the middle of December, but let's see if that's going to be the panacea for all their goaltending ills there in the Rocky Mountains. Now, you also had a player retire just last night in a one Kevin Shattenkirk. Now, he played on 7 teams, a bunch of teams. Won a Stanley Cup with the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2020. Played last year in Boston, but he played on a plethora of teams throughout his career. Rangers come to mind as one. Defenseman, good career, solid career. Kudos to him as he was unable to latch on to another team. Who knows if you get to the stretch of a season, I'm sure he's still in good condition and could actually step onto a roster. Whether or not that means maybe right before the deadline when you get to March, that's still 3 months away. But maybe there'll be a team that's going to be desperate for a guy that you could just plug him in there to be a 4th, 5th, or 6th defenseman on your team. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen there with Shattenkirk, but he retires. Long career there, well more than a dozen years, and did win a cup. So congratulations to him as he goes off to the next stage of his life, and who knows what that may mean. It may actually come back. I wouldn't be surprised if an opportunity were to arise that he would certainly be back in the fold when it comes to an NHL roster. Now, as far as what we got with the latest, Rangers, who bounced back with a win there yesterday after being booed out of the Garden there on Monday night, losing to the Blackhawks, the worst team in the sport, as the Blackhawks went in there and won 2-1 after the trade by the Rangers, Jacob Trouba over the weekend, and them losing to Seattle the day before that. Well, they win in Buffalo, a big win for them. They needed that in the worst way. But with them and also Colorado, as I mentioned before, 2 teams that had big-time aspirations. Now, the Avalanche have played a little bit better here. They've won 3 in a row. So give them credit as they try to ascend in the standings. But for the remainder of the sport, Panthers are still playing well. They have now won 3 in a row and have a 2-point advantage over the Maple Leafs. In the Metropolitan, the Devils, who have lost 2 in a row. Capitals have still played very well here, even without Alexander Ovechkin. Still no timetable on his return. They're in first place with 40 points. The Wild tied with the Jets. They're at the top of the Central. We know how great the start was for the Winnipeg Jets. And although they've come back to the pack, but they're still at the top there, tied with the most points in the sport there with the Minnesota Wild and the Golden Knights, who have also done a very good job. 2 points ahead of the Kings, who have won 6 in a row. And interestingly enough, both the Kings and Blackhawks are in town here throughout the week. Kings beat the Islanders there on Tuesday night. No surprise there. They'll play the Devils tonight in New Jersey before going to the Garden for a matinee game on Saturday at 1 o'clock. And the same can be said for the Blackhawks as they beat the Rangers Monday. Play the Devils tonight. They play the Islanders tonight in Long Island and then play the Devils Saturday afternoon in a matinee out in Newark at 1 o'clock. So for those fans of the Kings or Blackhawks, and you live in the tri-state area, you have 2 shots to see them here as they'll be in town tonight and Saturday afternoon. And as far as your schedule for the remainder of the week, tonight, Detroit and Philly, no big whoop there. Many years ago, that was a big matchup, especially when it comes to the tough guys. You had Probert and Kosar going into Philadelphia and the vaunted Spectrum against Dave Brown, Craig Berube, guys like that. Oh, that was to be blunt, a hockey fighter or hockey fight lover's wet dream. Today, not the case. Vegas and Winnipeg tonight, that is your big matchup there. Edmonton, Minnesota, Utah, Colorado, Florida, Vancouver, Boston, Seattle. Tomorrow you have the one game, no big whoop there. A lot of matinee games there on Saturday, as you know about Blackhawks, Devils, Rangers hosting the Kings, Flyers in Minnesota, Vegas at Edmonton. That's pretty much what you have there as I go down the rest of the schedule. Utah, San Jose. No, and then Sunday, Islanders will be in Chicago to close out their season series against them. Rangers in St. Louis, Vegas at Minnesota. That's a big game there Sunday. So Vegas has a very interesting schedule where they play tonight in Winnipeg, then Edmonton, followed by Minnesota. So Vegas says they're in first place. Let's see if they can continue to play at a high clip, considering they've won 3 in a row and very stiff competition to boot. there for the weekend. But that's what you have there in the NHL. And that's what you have with the podcast. Another one in the books, people, as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. If you haven't done so, people, please, I implore you to subscribe, rate, review on whichever podcast platform you listen to, Apple, Spotify, also the YouTube channel at JReels, which I post the podcast there, and also Spotify. You get video as well, as I continue to blaze a path, carve a trail when it comes to not only producing, hosting content, but putting it out there for the world to see as a full-time job. And I'm not getting paid for it as of yet. Hopefully with your assistance, help, etc., spread the word. Pass it on to those who like sports, love sports, follow sports, the kook sports fan, the casual sports fan, the diehard, etc., to your family, friends, foes, or frenemies. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate that. And also, you could check my socials for daily content, especially on the YouTube channel. And I also have lifestyle content too, which I'm going to have a lot more lifestyle content as we get to the end of the month. So even if you're not a sports fan, people, you could certainly be in tune to what's going on with me, with what's going on in the podcast, behind the scenes, etc. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JReels Podcast, Twitter, X, JReels1, just the number. Or if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion the old-fashioned way, the JReels Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood. It's in the DNA, as I like to say, from birth. Talking sports is what I love. It doesn't matter what day, what time, what place. I will always continue to deliver nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JReels Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JReels Podcast, on the flip, baby.